But let's kick things off this morning with Professor Frank Furedi, author, sociologist, of course, as well, because there's a new report which has been commandeered by the Daily Mail, in which Health Trust documents have revealed that it's not actually our fault that the gender mix-ups are happening all over the place. It's not really our fault that men and women don't get along. It's not really our fault that adults can't make sense of the world. It's all the fault of, guess what, colonialism. Frank, a very good morning to you.
Good morning. But you know, it is our fault because we're responsible for colonialism.
Well, you might be responsible for it. I don't take any responsibility for it at all.
You don't. Well, neither do I. But the narrative is that if you are a man, a heterosexual man, possibly white, over the age of 25, and if you can still move, then you are responsible for colonialism. By definition, according to the National Health Service, you're also responsible for everything from global warming to patriarchy to bad gender distinctions. And what they've done is they've created this fantasy story. It's a bit like a woke fairy tale where the evil forces of colonialism, in a sense, impregnate themselves into every possible problem and bear direct responsibility for it. And the tragedy is that the NHS, which is a very important institution, is now in the business of communicating these falsehoods and disorienting people who come to their classes and their seminars. And a health service has become something very, very different. The health service has become an agent of socialization rather than of providing healthcare to people.
I mean, I basically look upon the way that we run the country now as a very malfunctioning country, because we have, and I repeat this quite often, so forgive me if you've heard it before, a police service that doesn't like to arrest people and catch them for committing crime, a hospital service that doesn't really treat patients, a doctor's service that doesn't want to see patients, a border force that doesn't protect the borders, what else can we have? Any number of other, water companies that don't really provide you with water because they tell you there's a drought, electricity companies that can't provide you with cheap electricity anymore. We have a kind of railways that don't work. We have a system where nothing really does what it says on the tin anymore.
Yes, it's a huge problem in a sense. It's a dysfunction because what we now have increasingly is a situation where the state itself is unable to get things done. And it's never been the case beforehand that you have a situation like this where, in a sense, just about every dimension of our everyday life is dysfunctional. And you have universities where students cannot get their degrees. You have hospitals where essentially they become temples that you gotta wait to be let into, sometimes wait years to get into. And as a result of that, people do become demoralized and no longer trust anything because they know that when they're told that just call this number and we'll deal with your complaint, you will be waiting hours and hours and hours before you listen, before a human voice listens to you. So under those circumstances, we need to take a reality check and ask, why is it that our society is now run by institutions that are simply incapable of getting things done?
They really are. But the way that it kind of infiltrates the NHS is perhaps the most insidious, because I'm reading this piece today about this investigation that's been done, and it turns out that people who only occasionally present as women are now frequently allowed into female-only wards. Midwives are being warned that they can harm trans parents by describing them as mothers, and 999 operators have been told to ask emergency callers for their pronoun rather than risk misgendering them in the case of an emergency. This is actual harm being done on a daily basis to people who are not well.
Well, if you basically destroy the fundamentals of biological reality, and if the distinction between men and women now increasingly becomes seen as a fiction, no longer relevant, then all kinds of problems will kind of kick in, because essentially the hospital becomes not a place where, as a woman, you can be treated as a woman, or as a man, Yeah. You now become part of this social experiment in which the NHS, particularly its human resources departments, are zealously committed to. And in a sense, you become a two-bit player in this political drama which the NHS is putting on for us.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that colonialism is sort of getting the blame, because I've been listening to various interviews over time, reading pieces about what's going on Maui, And Maui is a very interesting study in what's going on in American politics. And I don't know whether you've been able to take a chance to look at some of this stuff, but they're all basically, I mean, where the fire happened was in a part of Maui which tended to be occupied by the poorer, more indigenous people. The mega rich people like Oprah Winfrey and Jeff Bezos, who have got massive mansions there, they all seem to have remained untouched by the fire. And the accusation being made by the locals is that because of colonialism, because of the sugar plantation magnates, because of historical kind of exploitation of Maui, somehow the fire caused the poorer people to suffer. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it's a very interesting narrative to be pushing kind of 200 years after it all changed.
Well, you know, most research shows that in every disaster, it's the poor that pay the price. If you're wealthy, you obviously do manage to minimize the risk to your livelihood or to your physical existence. But the idea that somehow colonialism, which is something that has gone long by, which no longer exists and no longer dominates our lives, is still responsible for this disaster. Doesn't make any sense. But we have to remember that these days, colonialism is held responsible for global warming. It's held responsible for global terrorism. It's literally held responsible for every negative aspects of our existence. So now you have this situation where instead of examining very, very carefully what happened in Hawaii, learning the lessons of what happened there that we could do something about, we, in a sense, have got to have this funny explanation where we go back in history and overlook the fact that there are things that could have been done today, like have a proper warning system that didn't really work, which could have made a difference.
Yeah.
Don't blame colonialism, blame the Hawaiian government and the Hawaiian institutions for not being up to the task of saving people's lives.
Yeah, that is the problem, isn't it? And I mean, at the end of the day, you can blame all sorts of things, but actual, adherence to sensible policy, which doesn't seem to have happened in Maui, and an awful lot, and I don't want to get wrapped up into the whole climate change argument, but an awful lot of the land use has changed to such an extent in places where these fires take place, that the fires do much more damage than they've ever done.
Yes, and the question of land use is a really important issue, ensuring that we get the right kind of balance between what kind of productive activity we put the land to, and the rest of the communities. That can be done quite intelligently because we now have a very sophisticated system of agrarian science, and it just simply means we adhere to these rules. If we ignore them, then obviously there's going to be all kinds of problems, from land erosion to fires to just about anything. And it seems to me that we need to look at reality in the face rather than find always the same kind of excuses, that it's patriarchy, it's sexism, it's global warming, which is then caused by colonialism, that is to blame.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously nothing that actually has happened could be the cause of anything at all.